everyone, and welcome to this Sunday Roast. We have some wonderful guests with us today. Piers, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the Rejoin EU Party?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Piers. I'm Deputy Leader of the Rejoin EU Party. I'm Irish. I'm Northern Irish, so I'm from the border between the two countries, but I live over here in London for the past 10 years. Rejoin EU is a party. Obviously, the name is we want to rejoin the EU. That's the main aim of the party. But we've been growing really well over the past few months, and over the past couple of years as well, standing for different seats and different elections, and simply because Brexit has been a disaster, and people are, thankfully, people are realizing this now, and people are gradually seeing our name out there and gradually getting more and more support, and hopefully, we're just going to keep building on this momentum so that we can finally put a bit of pressure on the Conservatives and Labour to just say Brexit is a mess. You need to sort this out, and hopefully reverse it.
James, our other guest, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Thanks, Max. Yes, I'm Jim. I'm also a deputy leader of the Rejoin EU Party. I think there are three of us all together. And I joined the Rejoin EU Party. Basically, I used to be a member of the Labour Party, but I've for long felt that there's no real progressive agenda to be had in the early 21st century that doesn't embrace rejoining the EU, that doesn't embrace internationalism. Essentially because political power has moved beyond the nation state now, and in a globalized world, there's absolutely no possibility of sort of socialism in one country. There's no possibility of achieving a progressive agenda unless we link up with the people in other countries, beyond the shores, as it were. So I stood as a Rejoin EU Party candidate in the Stretford and Urmston by-election in December of last year. It was my first outing in such an experience, as it were. Well, I thought I'd got to do. It was sort of on my bucket list. It was one of those things I've got to do at least once before I departed this planet. So I did that, and basically, it was a very strong Labour constituency. I was trying to appeal to Labour voters by saying, look, if you just keep on voting for the Labour Party in a sort of sheep-like manner, Keir Starmer's just going to shaft you time after time after time. Like me, you really do believe that Brexit is a pile of dog shit. Then you've got to be prepared to rebel and say we're not going to vote for you anymore. Otherwise he's not going to listen. It's as simple as that. Anyway, I'm waffling a bit, so I'll shut up now, and that's me anyway.
Thanks, Jim. And now we have your videos cut out for a little bit, but we have you back again. That's great. My wonderful co-host, Alex, can you tell us a bit about yourself for anyone who's new to the podcast?
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm also known as Political X. I'm a historian and an author, and I do a lot of video editing and ranting about Brexit in general. And my magnificent co-host, Max.
Thank you all. My name is Max. I run the Robespierre channel, where I talk about British politics and Brexit in particular. So the first question, as always, is how is Brexit going? Piers, we'll start with you. How is Brexit going?
Awful. Can't think of any other words to describe it. It's really going badly. Let's be honest here. It gets worse every day. The recent crisis, travel chaos at Dover, I think just exemplifies this, just how bad Brexit is going.
I heard it was a problem with the weather. It wasn't anything to do with Brexit.
Oh, of course. And it was the French, of course, as well. It definitely wasn't Brexit. It's just a mess. And it's just the fact that the governments and the opposition parties just don't want to talk about it it's scary in some ways, that just how they can let the UK just be damaged like this and just not address any of these issues. The obvious elephant in the room, they just do not want to address because they're so worried about losing potential voters. That shouldn't be the case. If you care about the UK, you should just want to talk about these issues openly. And just say, look, here's an issue. Let's solve it somehow by doing this certain thing, instead of just finding excuses and scapegoating our neighbors in France all the time. This just isn't how you should do politics. That's just not productive at all.
You can't imagine the Rejoining EU Party doing anything like that, can you?
Well, blaming the French? No, absolutely not. Or blaming the weather? No. I mean, come on, it's the UK. It rains and stormy here all the time. I mean, has that caused chaos in Dover before? No.
I think this reveals a very interesting phenomenon related to Brexit. Something which, unfortunately, I long suspected would be the case. You would expect that people stuck in passport queues for hours and hours and hours might be, turned against Brexit as a consequence. I think there's some of that, but I think unfortunately what also happens is that if you're a strong Brexiteer, you get involved in a circular process of reasoning. You start blaming the French, okay? Why would they do that? Well, why would the EU do that? Because it's a malign organization. Okay, so then you say to them, well, okay, so what evidence have you actually got that it's a malign organization? Well, because they make us wait in these passport queues. Why do they make us wait in these passport queues? Because they're a malign organization. So you go round and round and round and round, where, an anti-Brexit position just, constantly reinforces itself. It's something we'll have to try and, get past, I think. So we can.
Have you seen anything like that before in history, James, with other political points in history?
I'm not too sure, to be honest, Alex. I do remember, however, getting stuck in a passport queue shortly after Brexit. There was some technical, there was short-staffed or something like that. So that we had to wait a little while. The queue was a bit long. And I was standing behind this guy, and he was saying, well, this isn't the Brexit I voted for. And I thought to myself, oh, yes, it is. Just crazy. In fact, I have to confess, I was in very bad mood that day. So I actually had a go at the guy. And I hadn't realised who he was or who he was with. And after I had a go at him, his wife turned around to him and he said, James was never like that when we were doing our dancing classes. He was so polite. So, oh no! Oh goodness! It wasn't very pleasant. But there you go. Anyway, sorry, I've taken us off track. Let's get back on track.
Well, I think it's all connected. It's funny, isn't it? Because how much damage has it caused, and how much of it is being ignored? And it's really interesting as well. I wonder how many families have broken up or relationships have been destroyed as a result of Brexit. That's something I find really interesting, because there was a clip of a lady who I think, Max, you did a video on, where she had been a Remainer and now she was a Brexiteer. Yeah. And then had realised that there were issues about her boyfriend from Germany being able to come over to the UK. Because she was pregnant, she couldn't earn. And for some reason, that the earnings had to be correlated to the boyfriend in Germany.
For the visa, yeah. Yes. So in order to, I think it cost something like £3,000 for the visa. And she obviously didn't have the money, but he had the money, but it couldn't be him, because she'd have to sponsor him to come over. So it wasn't a case of him paying for as far as I remember, it's not the case of him just paying for the visa. It's she had to sponsor him, but she didn't have the money to do it. But this is, of course, there was no visa required when the UK was a member of the EU. The lady in particular, she claims that she voted to remain, but she supports Brexit now because Remainers are mean, basically. Which is a wonderful argument for, economic destruction. Yeah, I support economic destruction because people on the other side were mean to me, or mean in general.
There was a classic argument that came up on the BBC that suggested, which way would the racists vote?
What I said was that every racist and anti-Semite in the country pretty much probably voted for Brexit. That's all. That doesn't mean...
How do you know that in a secret ballot?
I don't know it.
How do you possibly know that?
I suspect it.
I think you should apologise.
To who?
To 70
to racists and anti-Semites.
because you've basically tried to slur anybody who voted Leave as a bigot, and I think you should apologise.
No, I haven't. I said that's the problem.
Listen, Mark, what he said is everyone who is a racist voted Leave.
How could he know that?
Well, that of course is up for discussion.
It's a secret ballot. How can he know?
You know, for all the reasons I've used already, which is that the problem for nationalists generally is that they fall into the hands of what we call ethnic nationalists.
All right, you mentioned Dominic Raab earlier, and on that we haven't got time to actually play the clip. Hang on. Let me bring in the two ladies. Hang on. Grace, there is a point that Dominic Raab said that there will be a day of reckoning if Brexit doesn't happen, and there would be a day of reckoning, the implication is, if it went to a second referendum. Do you accept that there is a danger of that?
No, totally. But as we can see now, this is such a tricky situation.
I mean, that caused quite a bit of a stir, but then it's like, well, that is actually somewhat of a valid point. Not to say that people did vote for that reason, but if a group that have negative content, it's a bit like going, the KKK, are you going to vote in the same direction as them? Probably not, because they've probably got some horrible, kooky ideas that you're not going to be interested in. And that's not to say that Brexiteers are that. They might have 1,000 other reasons as to why they voted in that direction. But if you know that's the direction that racists are most likely to go in, it probably doesn't sort of suggest that it's the best of ideas in which to go in that direction. I can see, Jim, I can see your head nodding quite a bit there. What are your thoughts on that?
I absolutely agree with you, Alex. I mean, you know, before the referendum, you know, and in the years leading up to it, I mean, I took EU membership for granted, and I didn't really pay much attention to that, you know, that aspect of politics. And you know, if anything, I just thought, oh, you know, these sort of Tory right wingers, these you know, anti-EU people were just kind of really just sort of cranky and rather boring. I mean, I just couldn't be bothered with it, to be honest with you. Then the referendum came round, and I started to become more aware of what's going on. And yes, like you, Alex, I just thought to myself, okay, Nigel Farage is pro-Brexit. He's an extreme right winger. I mean, this is a right wing project. You know, there was this sort of Lexit, you know, this left wing version of Brexit, if you remember, and you know, there were sort of people in the Labour Party in favour of Brexit, and I was really struck. What was the name of the? Oh goodness, George Galloway. So they did a movie called Lexit, the movie, and it's really striking. They interviewed George Galloway, and one of the things he says is, and Britain is not nothing, you know. Let's make Britain great again.
On making Britain great again, not to hand out in tax cuts to the richest people, but in making Britain great again. And I believe it could
make Britain great again. And I thought, I've heard that somewhere before. You know, I thought, you know, as I said before, you can't take a pro-Brexit position and be on the left in politics. I don't think, you know, the two are mutually exclusive.
Well, Labour Party seem to be doing a pretty damn good job of that at the moment, don't they? They've gone pretty far right.
Well, yes. You know, I mean, and this is what I find so frustrating about the Labour Party. You know, they elevate opportunism to a matter of principle. You know, they don't understand that, yes, political parties have a duty to represent the public, clearly, but they also have a duty to lead it. You know, they have a pedagogical function. And so one of the reasons why, you know, why Brexit took place in the first place was that British parties never, you know, understood that in order to make membership of the European Union work, one of the things they needed to do was to make it clear to their followers and to citizens generally that, yes, they were citizens of the United Kingdom, but also citizens of the European Union, that the two were not mutually exclusive, that, but they never made an effort to sort of inculcate these sort of identities among citizens. So, you know,
I'm going to bring that over to Piers, because you've got the youth perspective on this in regards to Volt and how are they responding to it? Because James has said something really quite interesting. I can see Max you were keen to say something there, so I'll bring you in next. Piers?
Well, it's from the European perspective or from the youth perspective?
You're a youth.
The youth perspective. I mean, the thing. Also, I was, I was old enough to vote in the referendum. I was 21 at the time. Obviously, there's successive people now who are just, starting to turn 18, and obviously who weren't eligible to vote back in 2016. And every single one of that new generation, especially Gen Z, the newest generation, are all just like, yes, Brexit is a disaster. Of course, if we were eligible to vote, we'd vote to remain, like, obviously. And it's the same across Europe as well. Even the young people in Europe who weren't alive back in, or weren't eligible to vote back in 2016, like in France and Italy and Spain, they're also like, yeah, Brexit was a disaster. If our country does that, yeah, I'm definitely gonna vote to stay. And it's not just young people, also people who were around during the referendum in other countries in Europe. They're seeing the support for leaving the EU has also dropped massively in their own respective countries. I mean, there was what they said back in 2016 was that it was either UK, Sweden, or Denmark was going to leave first. And now Sweden and Denmark, they've seen their support for leave drop massively, and all these supposed Eurosceptic parties there are all just like, oh yeah, maybe let's not leave. That's not a good idea, actually.
No, I agree 100%. I just come in quickly and then I'll let you continue. For example, here in Italy, we have the League Party, which is a far-right party, and they originally had, before Brexit, they had a plan, or part of their manifesto was a referendum on EU membership and referendum on the euro. The euro somewhat is still there, but EU membership has been completely dropped. So yeah. Wow. Sorry, go ahead, Piers. I just want to bring that in.
No, exactly. That's exactly it. And even in Finland, this is a good example. Finland, the second largest party there is Eurosceptic. Their whole idea of their party was to have a referendum on Finland's membership of the EU. That's not going to happen. They're just like, nah, we're not going to do that. It's political suicide for us. So that is what Brexit has done to every single Eurosceptic party and across Europe. It has not done them any favors at all. They've had to completely change their policies because of it, because it's been such a disaster. And that really says something.
It'll be interesting to see as well how this goes. I mean, personally, I would say they've already lost the Brexit argument for UK. We will rejoin, because there's no way you're going to dissuade the youth. And we were talking about it again last week. Rose-tinted glasses. Everyone's going to be looking back and go, oh, that was really good back then. And now look at us. And the economy isn't recovering. I mean, Jeremy Hunt today came out and tried to come out and say that the economy shrinking was still a good thing because it's not shrinking as bad as it was. Like, you're a prat.
I've been run over by a bus, but at least I wasn't run over by a train.
I'm in a hospital. I'm not going to die, so it's all right. It's fine. It's just.
Could I ask both of you? I think this is a question that a lot of people watching the stream would like to know the answer to. When do you see the UK rejoining? And maybe another question related to that: what parts of the UK do you see rejoining? Because if Scotland becomes independent, maybe it will go a different route. But do you see a time frame? What do you think needs to happen before the UK can rejoin? So maybe Piers, do you want to go first, and then we'll bring in James?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to be honest here. Look, I think it's going to take a while. We have to slowly rebuild our relationship with them. But I think that has to start with rejoining the single market and customs union. That is one of the best ways to do it. And actually, even though, yes, as a party, we want to rejoin the EU as a whole, because I think that would be the best deal, rejoining the single market and customs union would actually solve a lot of the issues that Britain is going through right now, especially in terms of ports and airports, the problems that we're seeing there. That would solve an awful lot of those problems that we're seeing. But then taking it one step further, rejoining the EU, that would solve the other problems that we're also having. But I really do think that is one of the main things that we need to look at, especially, well, let's be honest here, Labour is probably going to be the next government in the next general election. But I think they should be looking at it. But unfortunately, they're not. They've ruled it out completely.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate here and say I don't think that's going to be an option. I don't think we're going to be able to do it in stages. We're either going to be in or we're going to be out. And the reason I'm saying that is because we can't join EFTA, because Norway has said we don't want someone as big as you in. And we don't, and the EU have gone, we do not want another Swiss deal under any circumstances, because it's a nightmare.
It is.
It's all this extra admin for nothing.
Exactly.
I think it's the general premise I'm getting from what I've read from the EU. So the only way in seems to be, because those are the only two options. I mean, EFTA would give us single market access to the customs union, but I could also see a lot of the Brits going nuts, going, well, we've not got a seat at the table, but we're being dictated to. But any thoughts on that, Piers, before we move over to Jim?
The way that I would look at it is this, and I do agree with you. There is going to be a lot of people, and you're right. They are right to say that. Oh, hang on, we're joined this, and we don't actually have a say in it. We're just being told what to do. That is a very fair point, and that is that is the reason why it is better for us to be fully in the EU. But I think at the same time, rejoining the single market and customs union allows the UK as a whole to test the water and see where the UK is going and how we respond to it and how much we improve our relationship with Europe just by rejoining the single market and customs union. And then we take it a step further. So that's the way I would look at that.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
I can see the logic in that. Jim, what are your thoughts on?
Well, I think, I think 5 conditions need to be met. First of all, Brexit has to continue to prove to be a complete disaster, which I guess,
that's the easy part.
That's the easy part. I mean, I don't think there are many people out there willing to put a lot of money on the idea that it'll get any better. Okay. The second thing is that there has to be a significant shift in public opinion, which again seems to be going in the right direction as far as we are concerned. Thirdly, all the various groups and organizations that are part of the Rejoin movement need to, be functioning well and getting on with each other and keeping the issue high on the agenda of public discussion. Thirdly, there has to be some movement within the 2 main parties, or at least the opposition parties. So the pro-Rejoin forces need to become stronger within, Labour and the Liberal Democrats and what have you. In fact, I think the best outcome for us at the next general election will be one where we get a minority Labour government, which is dependent on the support of the SNP or the Liberal Democrats, and so therefore the more convinced Remain supporters can hold Keir Starmer's feet to the fire on that particular issue. And then I think the 5th condition that needs to be met is that the EU's got to want to have us back, which is something that is not a small consideration. Yeah, I think they'll want convincing that if we rejoin the EU, we won't have another Brexit fiasco again and change our minds. I'm not sure, to be honest, Piers, about rejoining the customs union and single market without actually being full members, because of course, if you're a member of the single market and customs union without being full member, you're a rule taker rather than a rule maker. I'm not sure not sure how attractive that would be. I think perhaps finally we need, as a Rejoin EU Party, to score some significant successes, and I feel very optimistic about that, because paradoxically, the electoral system, which is thought to be very unfavourable to small parties in a certain sense, gives them a considerable amount of power. I mean, if you think about how the referendum came about in the first place, It came about after after UKIP became the largest party in the 2014 referendum, and Cameron was induced to promise the referendum, never thinking he'd have to deliver on the promise because the Conservatives weren't expected to get an overall majority in the 2015 election. But precisely because UKIP took votes from the Labour Party as well, that was precisely the outcome that came about, with the result that that for him the referendum became politically unavoidable. So I think we can do the same in reverse. So that's why I actually feel very optimistic, and well, the United Kingdom may well have broken up before Rejoin becomes a serious prospect, and the breakup of the United Kingdom may well be one of the major factors that brings it closer.
I'm going to go and quickly defend Piers, because I'm going to go, wait a minute, and we've got a segue. Northern Ireland is the litmus test.
Mary McDonald was being interviewed on the Today programme this morning, and she's predicting that there will be a border poll this decade. I don't know what, Max, you probably, and Piers, you're probably, you've got a finger closer on the pulse of that area of politics than I have. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Well, I mean, it's not, I mean, I don't know really what to say about that. To be honest, I mean, look, I'm from the Unionist community. I'm Protestants, but the thing is this: Sinn Féin are the largest party in the north, and the way the projections are going in the Republic, they're also going to be the largest party in the south as well at the next election. And if that does happen, then yeah, they really do have a mandate to say, yeah, let's introduce a border poll, because both sides of the islands are agreeing to it. But will they be able to change a lot of the Unionist voters' minds? This is the thing, because I mean, some will, but some will be convinced by that, especially with the issues that Brexit has caused on like local businesses in Northern Ireland. But others who maybe they're DUP voters, we're just going to be completely against it anyway. It's a difficult one.
For me, it's a very interesting question, and it's very interesting to have a Unionist on, because I think the real issue here is the Northern Ireland Protocol, or the Windsor Framework now, because this actually gives Northern Ireland a very unique position. It's not me talking, that's the Rishi Sunak talking, but it puts Northern Ireland in a very unique position where this could be something that, and I really don't understand why it's not happening, but Unionists should be selling this as a reason to stay in the Union. This is a very strong argument against a united Ireland. Look at the benefits we have. If we have a united Ireland, we'll lose that benefit. We lose the benefit of having frictionless trade with the internal market of the United Kingdom. So when it comes to a border poll, I think there's a lot of discussion taking place about what's happening north of the border and not so much south of the border. And I'm not sure the people in Southern Ireland, if you want to, or the Republic of Ireland. I'm going to get a lot of hate for that, Southern Ireland. But it just for people who don't know the stream, or who don't know the channel, or don't know the situation. But I don't think there's as much support for United Ireland as people think there is in the Republic. But as Piers pointed out here, if you have Sinn Féin in Northern Ireland and Sinn Féin in the Republic, yeah, they're going to definitely push it. But there are a number of economic arguments to be made against a united Ireland, for a united Ireland. I personally, I think if there was a referendum and it succeeded, a united Ireland would receive a lot of funding from the EU and the US to smooth out some of the bumps. But the political question is much more difficult to answer. I'm of the idea that there should be more outreach to the Unionist community in Northern Ireland, convince them that, look, a united Ireland is not a threat to your identity, because identity is so important for many people in Northern Ireland, be it nationalist or Unionist. But I really do believe that the Unionists should be pushing more and more the idea of the Northern Ireland Protocol as a benefit of Northern Ireland's current status.
Do you not think there are parts within the community that do want a border, a land border? I get that distinct impression.
Maybe we can
really want it.
Yeah, we can bring in Pierce on this, because I think it's important for people to remember that unionism is not a block, it's not a monolith.
Yeah.
There are many different points of view within unionism and loyalism.
No, but yeah, Max, you're right. I mean, that's the you got to remember is this. There's three big. There's three big unionist parties in Northern Ireland. You got DUP, else Unionists, and then you've also got Alliance, which they are, even though they're cross community, they are kind of unionist because they want to keep Northern Ireland in the UK. And I would be considered Alliance supporter over in Northern Ireland. But that's what you got to remember. That there's like soft unionists and there's hard unionists. And the hard unionists, they were against the Good Friday Agreements. They were basically just against anything Irish. And then you've got soft unionists who are like, oh no, let's work together, But we also want to keep links with the rest of UK as well. So you just got to remember those two aspects. Same with nationalist communities as well. You've got hard nationalists like, no, United Ireland's just get rid of everything British related, and then you got soft nationalists like, well, yeah, I think United Ireland would be good, but I'm quite happy with what we got right now as well. So you've got all these different. It's very complicated,
And then Brexit, of course, added an extra twist to all of that.
Yeah, indeed.
It was going so well. It was all calming down. Everyone seemed to get a bit of what they wanted. And then the nationalists Jacob Rees-Mogg described Northern Ireland as the tail wagging the dog. That's how he described Northern Ireland. And you're like, you're a unionist. And that's how you describe part of the UK.
But then you have to remember Jacob Rees-Mogg described Welsh as a foreign language. So, and not Latin. So,
do you know what Wales means?
Foreign tongue or something like that.
I thought you were going to say something else.
Yeah, I thought you were as well.
That came out. Foreigner.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Wales is the Prince of Wales is a prince of foreigners. That's why Cornwall has the word wall, because it's foreigners.
Then I issue an apology to Jacob Rees-Mogg. Technical apology. Sorry, Jim.
Sorry, no, I just wanted to ask you a question about DP, I suppose, because I mentioned this book by Fintan O'Toole earlier on, and his sort of basic starting point, I suppose, in a way, is sort of fairly obvious in a sense. He starts off by saying, well, how is it that a relatively prosperous country, etc., doing quite well for itself and so on, could inflict upon itself an act of such colossal self-harm? Yeah, and I've been thinking about this, and I suppose one of the answers that one can give, at least as far as Northern Ireland is concerned, is that people perhaps weren't aware at the time of the referendum of exactly what its consequences would be, for the Good Friday Agreement, the border, etc., etc. And given all the difficulties that we've had since then, I'm wondering, would the DUP have supported Brexit, had it been fully aware of these problems, at the time of the referendum? Or is it, and this is the other possible answer, I think, that they were aware of it, but a bit like Boris Johnson, Brexit was never actually meant to happen. For Brexit, for Boris Johnson, it was meant to be just a jolly caper. Another example of heroic failure. This is why Fintan O'Toole's book is called Heroic Failure. There's this cult of heroic failure in particularly English, and the word is English here, not British, but English, because of course Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland are completely different. In English culture, there's this cult of heroic failure. Yes. Gordon of Khartoum, the Charge of the Light Brigade, Livingston, the Antarctic, where the heroic Englishman, goes out and is very stoic and doesn't give in to self-pity. So this was supposed to be another thing with Brexit, that it was never actually meant to succeed. There was that famous thing, wasn't there? You remember the day after the referendum took place, Michael Gove's wife wrote to him and said, "You were only supposed to blow the bloody doors off," you know, the famous line from the Michael Caine film. Yeah. So it is another possible, yeah. So it's another possible answer. You know, the DUP had the same attitude. You know, it was never really meant to succeed. But because it was so bound up with, you know, sort of UK assertiveness, if that makes sense, you know, it seemed natural to them to support it. I don't know.
Maybe we can bring in Pierce and Alex as well. I just wanted to say something about that. I'm of the belief that the DUP always wanted a hard border on the island of Ireland. So they were against the Good Friday Agreement from the beginning. They switched later on, I think it was 2007, 2008, but that was for political reasons. It was politically expedient for them to do so. But for example, there's an interview you can find online where Jeffrey Donaldson was asked, I think it was Jeffrey Donaldson who was asked, you know, this is going to cause something like 40,000 jobs. Brexit is going to cause this amount of damage. And his response was,
I understand the points about negotiating, but could I ask you on a human level, as an MP, as a DUP MP, how will you feel if no deal comes to pass? With the hand of history on your shoulder, will you feel like you can live with yourself if those job losses come true?
Of course I will. I can live with myself, Emma.
You know, it's not, he says, no, that's stupid. That's not going to happen. It's going to be a success. It was like ideological at that stage. It was like, I don't care. To hell with the consequences. Of course, he'll be okay, but our ordinary people won't. And we saw it also with the protocol. You know, when good news came out about the protocol, look, businesses are doing better. There are problems, of course, with the protocol, but whenever good news was brought out, the DUP hid from it. They didn't deny it. They didn't try to excuse it away. They literally hid from the news. Sorry, maybe Pierce, do you want to come in on that?
No, that is a very good point. What I was just going to say in addition to that is this: Northern Ireland has been the fastest growing area of the UK for the past 3 years. And every single time a DUP politician has been interviewed about this, about the economic stats behind it, about how well businesses are doing, you're right, they just ignore us. They're just like, oh, no, you're exaggerating it. It's not that good. You know, it's just like, what is good enough for the DUP? Because I never know. Like after many years of living there, I still don't know what the DUP actually wants, apart from a hard border between the two countries. It's, yeah, I don't hide my hatred of the DUP.
But I've never heard of a politician not being happy about the success of the economy before. I've never heard of that. That's just, I mean, if you put the border up, it just goes into all-out war. The new IRA have been interviewed on TV saying, "You stick that up, we'll blow it up, and we don't care. We'll consider it a declaration of war." It's not messing around type of stuff. It's like, what are you doing? Why are you wanting to provoke this?
No, nobody really wants it. It's just like, even in the DUP, I don't think there's a majority who want a border on the island of Ireland. They understand, because some of their voters are farmers who have land, literally land on one side and land on the other, or people's houses are literally on the border. You know, you walk from your kitchen to your living room, and you've moved from outside the EU into the EU. But this is the reality, and you put this idea of putting in a hard border was never going to fly. Which really, I don't have any hair left because I was tearing it out listening to Jacob Rees-Mogg in 2019 talking about how we'll have an electronic border, we'll be able to scan trucks as they're driving around and stuff like this, things that don't exist at the moment.
Switzerland doesn't have it. It's got to. It's a modern society. They're not poor. Like, they can't install anything like this, because you've got to physically check this stuff. And then it makes you go, the two things to that. Man, it makes you go, right, they're all about hard borders. And every time hard borders are required, they seem to completely flop. Whether it's COVID, Northern Ireland. Priti Patel was apparently petitioning the Irish government to secure their borders to make sure Ukrainians weren't coming in through Ireland into Northern Ireland. because it's an unsecure border.
But then maybe
the Irish are just going to tell them to go stick it somewhere else.
I don't want to take over the discussion, but if you look at what's happening in Dover at the moment, there are no border checks. What was that all about? Why? It was all about we need to leave the EU to take back control. But there are no controls at the port of Dover with goods coming in from the EU, and we're seeing all the problems related to that.
It's been delayed, I think. It will be introduced soon. I don't know when, but which is going to be... Everything is bad now in Dover. Just wait.
If the WTO get someone coming in and complaining about the EU being allowed to bring in free goods to the UK without checks, and all the other countries aren't able to do that.
I'll actually correct you, and it's actually worse than that. I actually thought that was a problem as well. I did a bit of research on it, and there's a guy called Michael. I forget. Apologies, he might be watching this, but I'll try and I'll give a hat tip to him when I remember. But he corrected me on this. There aren't actually any checks being carried out on goods coming in from the rest of the world either. So it's not just there are no checks on goods coming in from the EU, but in order to avoid problems with the WTO, we're not going to check on goods coming in from other parts of the world either.
So we go completely tariff-free?
Yeah.
On everything?
No tariff, I don't know, but on checks, it seems there are no checks being carried out. So the other countries are not going to raise an issue at the WTO because there's nothing to raise because there are no checks being carried out.
You're even losing out on tax revenue. Because I could just go and say, right, I don't know what you can bring in that's tax-free. Let's say newspapers. I could just say it's a bunch of newspapers, and actually it's a load of electronic equipment. And that's mad. They're totally insane.
As long as the paperwork is correct, but the paperwork doesn't have to correspond with what's actually in the truck.
Right. That shut down businesses though, because I think in Birmingham or it was Leicester, there's a cigarette shop that's collapsed, and they were the only one in the area. Not to advocate smoking or anything, but it sets the principle of they couldn't compete with all the stuff that was just flooding into the market. But that means that standards and checks go down. So the EU will just go, right, the EU came out and said about that the other week as well with honey. Turns out a lot of the honey coming in from the UK doesn't have honey in it. It has sugar. It's sugar water with a bit of honey if you're lucky. Then you're going, but they could be sticking anything into this stuff. You don't know if there's any dodgy chemicals. There's no... This is just the neoliberal agenda. That was the point of the CPTPP, the toilet paper agreement, which I call it. Because that's what it's worth. It's worth toilet paper. And it might as well have been written on toilet paper. I mean, we could go into discussion about that. But yeah, they're mad. Absolutely deranged. I mean, if I was playing the bad guy role, which I do like to do in fictional circumstances, this is like a gold mine. You just totally exploit the system because the morons in charge are just...
There was a spot check carried out some months ago at Dover where they checked 20 trucks and 19 of them contained contraband. That was on one day. So, you can imagine, okay, how often are trucks passing through? And I think it was meat that was not fit for human consumption. So, when they talk about we need to take back control, but you already had control, but now you have no control. Because if you do impose checks, then the trucks stop, and then supermarkets will run out. I want to bring in the guys also on. We have some other topics, but just one thing about, for example, medicines. 90% of medicines in the UK are imported. I actually had to go to the pharmacy today, and I was speaking to the pharmacist about this. I was asking, are there shortages of medicines in Italy? And he said, yes, there are. A lot of it is due to raw materials from Ukraine, for example. So in Europe, we are suffering the shortages of certain medicines as well. He talked about ibuprofen. But in the UK, you have an extra added problem of that of Brexit. So, we're all suffering certain consequences of the war in Ukraine. But the UK has added an extra layer of problems because, as as it seems 90% of medicines are imported, and that's a huge problem.
There's a great tweet that I saw. Someone summed it up perfectly. It's like, it's the war in Ukraine, but it's also Brexit. It's the pandemic, but it's also Brexit. And it's every little thing that the government says it's the fault of. Yes, but it's also Brexit. Yes, it's this thing's fault, but Brexit is mitigating that problem. It's making it even worse, And that is what the government's just not acknowledging. It's that every little thing, every additional thing that Europe's got to face, we get it 10 times worse. Yeah. And they're just not talking about that because they just compare themselves to other European countries. Like, see, look at France, look at Germany, they're struggling too. It's like, yes, they are, but we're 10 times worse. And why can't you see that? You can see that based on the stats,
How do I mean, this links in quite nicely with Biden. This is why we're never going to get a free trade agreement because of Brexit.
Absolutely.
And everything that he's been saying. Who would like to jump in on the Joe Biden trip to Northern Ireland and Ireland? Who would like to go first on that one?
I'll go first. So yeah, obviously, Joe Biden is over in Northern Ireland and the Republic at the moment, so on a 3-day state visit. And it's been his first day in Northern Ireland didn't go very well. The photo shoots of like trying to get a photo with him and Rishi Sunak was a disaster. It didn't really help. There was a storm at the night as well, so they were just completely drenched. But it's been an absolute nightmare for them, and it was not a good publicity for Rishi Sunak. And then he very quickly left, and then went over the border to the Republic, where it has actually been a huge success. It was all very well planned, all by the Irish government. Great photo opportunities for the Irish government and also for Joe Biden as well, and it's made him look very, very good. Apart from the thing that he said about the Irish rugby team, that was a bit awkward. But
what did he say about the Irish rugby team?
So he described how one of the players was next to him. He received a tie. I think maybe Pierce, you can correct if I don't remember fully. He received a tie from one of the Irish players, and this player, the team had beaten the All Blacks, the New Zealand rugby team, and Joe Biden said,
"You see this tie I have with a shamrock on it? This was given to me by one of these guys, right here." Was a hell of a rugby player, and they beat the hell out of the Black and Tans. Oh God, it was wonderful. But
yeah, he'd given the Black and Tans a beating. It's like there's a bit of a difference between the All Blacks and the Black and Tans. The Black and Tans were an auxiliary organisation of the British Empire in Ireland in the 1920s.
The Brexiteers and GB News are going nuts about it, but they don't understand geopolitics. Nigel Farage went on about it. Oh, Biden doesn't like us, they don't like us. It's like, that's not how it works. Like, basically, just look at American influence and political stature. They run how they want to run, and you can either join them or you can get in their way.
Yeah.
And they'll punish you somehow.
No, if you want to get in their way, you have to be pretty big, like the EU or China. Like if you're small, you're just going to be pushed aside.
Yeah, we're the 51st state. We just do as we're told, and that's always how it's been. You can push back, but then you'll lose out on trade deals and everything else. I mean, we pushed back on Vietnam, and then they were backing Argentina over the Falklands to begin with. They changed. I think it was the defense secretary for the US that flipped it around, but he was going. And it's interesting. The only person, and this is terrible, the only person who seems to get it was Jacob Rees-Mogg. He did a speech on GB News talking about it, and I was like, okay, so you get geopolitics. But Nigel Farage was just like going mad about it, being like, oh, he's not one of us. Oh, we'll never get a trade deal with him. And it's like, you were bragging how Trump was going to get a trade deal. But that also showed how stupid Nigel Farage is when it comes to understanding both geopolitics and the US political system. Trump can go and say, I want to give you a trade deal, but it's Congress, and there's 36 million Irish Americans. They literally, I think it's Chicago, isn't it? They fill the water with green dye on St. Patrick's Day.
And it's bipartisan, so it's not just the Democrats. So it's not like we wait for the Democrats to be out of power and then we can get our trade deal. There are Republicans who are part of the Irish lobby as well.
Yeah.
So
it's a bit like it's like going to and I'm sort of going. They did this with Obama, and Obama's, I think, grandfather was tortured by British troops in Kenya. And then Biden's family, it seems, there's lots of rumors kicking around, but his mum was not a fan of the British and also instructed him not to go bow down to the Queen. And you're also going, well, there's a lot of American history behind that because they separated from us. It was a civil war, and they removed they didn't want anything to do with the monarchy. They've created a republic. So I can also get why Biden wouldn't go to a coronation. And that's another thing that seems to be setting off and triggering all that. They are so woke, aren't they? Those GB News people throwing their toys out the pram and just wow, you're spoiled little children. And it's almost like going, and I'll finish on this. We're important, so treat us importantly. And the Americans are going, no, wake up to the reality of where we are. And I think a lot of Brits are really struggling to understand that, and GB News is being triggered all the time. Sorry, Jim, come in for a while. What are your thoughts on that?
Again, it reminds me of a point that Fintan O'Toole makes. He tries to explain Brexit in cultural terms, I think very successfully. And basically his point is that Brexit is a manifestation of both sadomasochism and massive self-pity. Because basically, in the aftermath, ever since the Second World War, the English have been battling with two totally conflicting emotions. One is a feeling of self-satisfied grandeur, having been the victors in the Second World War. The second is extreme anxiety associated with feelings of inferiority, because, of course, after the Second World War, Britain underwent a process of relative economic decline, lost the empire, went through Suez and all the rest of it. And so the only way to bring these two conflicting emotions together is through self-pity. Yes. And what is self-pity? It's the feeling that, you deserved much but received little. And so therefore, what Brexit was able to bring these two emotions together because it allowed the British to change places, with the people it had oppressed through the empire for so many decades and centuries, to feel that it was being oppressed by the European Union, the Brussels bureaucracy, all this sort of thing. It embodies this sort of weird, this incredible contradiction, this sort of feeling of superiority on the other hand, and this feeling of inferiority, this feeling of being a depressed, an oppressed nation on the other. And it also involves a massive element of sadomasochism, because yes, Brexit may bring about a considerable amount of pain, but that's fine as long as we can inflict more pain on other people. All those people trying to cross the channel in boats, and the immigrants, and all the rest of it. So anyway, yeah, that's no. I was just reminded of that when you mentioned about this sort of feeling of inflated self-importance that the British, and particularly the English, have, in relation to this. They think they've got a special relationship with the United States, which gives them a degree of influence over American policymakers, which other countries don't have.
It's delusional.
It's delusional.
It's like you don't get how America has worked for the last 100 years. It's we're in charge, do what we say. It's not a partnership. It's an abusive relationship. I can't say that. That's mean. I will I'll turn around and say this. they should have gone all out and offered honey, and all they've done is caused a tantrum and thrown out vinegar. And you get more flies with honey than you do with vinegar, as my gran would say. Piers, what are your thoughts on that?
I think the way I always look at it is that, look, the UK is still really important. So like we are the 6th, 7th, like that kind of changes. 6th, 7th largest economy in the world. Like whatever we think about it, we are still a big economy. Out of all the countries in the world, we are still big, and we still have influence. I mean, let's take, for example, the AUKUS, the new nuclear submarine deal with Australia and between the United States as well. That is really big. But I think we have to just accept the fact that our position in the world has declined over the past few years as well. We are still important, but it's declined a bit. And it's like what you're saying. It's like the way that America looks at it now is like, well, yes, you're important, but you're equally as important as like Japan or France or Germany. We don't prioritize you over other countries anymore now. You are on an equal level playing field now with our other allies. And I think that's what a lot of us in the UK and a lot of people in the governments have to acknowledge, and I just have to finally accept. I mean, the thing is, whole thing about the term of special relationship, I only really realized this recently, is that Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, they don't like that term because they think it makes the UK sound needy and weak. So they've asked any British government and the US government to stop using that phrase in any official documents and any media documents. So now it's just like a normal alliance. You can't help but feel it's like, well, in some ways we still are a bit needy and weak, especially in the past few years, how we kind of, but I think close relationships with America is great, but so in some ways we have been kind of groveling to them, especially since we left the EU, because we now got even less allies, so we have to rely on the US even more.
I'm going to add to that. We've actually pissed off both parties in Congress. That's something that is unique. I've never heard of anyone managing to do that. The Republicans and the Democrats are hacked off with us, and both sides aren't willing to do anything to do any trade deals with us.
But it's even worse than that, because if you think about the trade deals that Liz Truss signed with New Zealand or Australia, they're terrible for the UK, but good for New Zealand. And Joe Biden won't even waste the time necessary, won't even waste time having a really bad trade deal for the UK and a good one for the US. That's how it's not even worth the hassle. That's a huge problem, I think. And it's not like we're negotiating as equals or even semi-equals. It's like, the Brexiteers would go to Washington and say, we'll sign away everything. Just give us the time. And the US are like, we can't even be bothered with the time.
It's like US and the EU are becoming more aligned, and the UK's just going a completely different path.
I do have a question, because we've got deputy leaders here. Do you have a message for the deputy leader, Lee Anderson, Conservative Party?
Oh, God. James, do you want to start on that?
Oh, goodness.
I think we're already there.
Join the Rejoin EU Party. It's a sort of question I'd put to him that I would want to put to Rishi Sunak, when he said that, Northern Ireland has such a fantastic position because it's both a member of the single market and has access to the UK market. And people, of course, said, well, if that's the case, so why can't the rest of us be part of the EU single market as well then? Have you become a rejoiner? If so, here we are. Join us.
My message would be, he says that we're constantly talking Britain down. No, we're not talking Britain down. We actually care about this country, and we're actually trying to improve it and fix the problems that his government has caused.
That's patriotism.
Yes, indeed.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.